I'd ironed the dress the night before, steam rising like breath from memory. The lilac lace crackled under the iron's heat, and I pressed every seam with care, just like I used to when Harold and I had weddings to attend, before grief and time made the invitations fewer and the dresses tighter. That morning, the bedroom was filled with light, bright enough to see every tiny thread, every place the lace had worn thin. I slipped it on slowly. My hands shook a little, not because it didn't fit, but because it did. The scent of lavender starch clung to the fabric, and I let my palms press down the sleeves one last time. My heart patted gently behind my ribs. I hadn't worn lace in years, not since my anniversary dinner at the country club, the one with the candlelight and the quiet goodbye. That dress is still remembered, and so did I. By the time I arrived, at the garden I'd managed to smile, not the big kind, just the polite one. I walked tall, chin slightly raised, but inside I felt like a girl at her first dance, unsure if anyone had saved her a spot. The smell of fresh-cut grass filled my nose, and someone passed with a plate full of chicken salad, the mayonnaise tang riding the wind. Laughter rolled from a nearby table, too loud for how early it was. I held my clutch tighter than I meant, too. Everyone seemed so sure of themselves. A soft breeze lifted my sleeve just as the words reached me. Who even wears sleeves like that? The voice came behind me, quiet enough to pretend it wasn't meant for me, but loud enough to land. Her laugh followed, light, pointed, like a needle dipped in sugar. I stood still. My breath caught mid-inhale, and for a second I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then I felt it, my chest tightening, like someone had pulled a drawstring. Around my lungs, I didn't turn around, I didn't cry. But I burned. It wasn't just about sleeves. It was the way you get dismissed so easily, like you're part of the decoration, not the room. I looked down at my arm. The lace fluttered, gentle, exposed. I let the breeze carry it back down. I stood at the buffet table, holding a paper plate. I no longer wanted to fill. My hands hovered over the potato salad, but nothing looked good. I wasn't hungry. I was trying not to crumble. Voices buzzed around me, light gossip, someone talking about the cake, a toddler squealing near the lemonade. But none of it reached me. My ears were full of her laugh, that quick, careless sound that echoed louder than any toast I'd ever heard. It curled inside me, small but sharp, like the sting of a nettle under your sleeve. I shifted my weight and pretended to consider the pasta salad. My plate stayed empty. So did my stomach, but not my pride. Then I was swallowing bite by bite. She glanced up just as I turned slightly, and for the briefest moment, our eyes met. Hers narrowed first, just a flicker of smugness beneath mascara. She didn't flinch, didn't hide. She wanted me to know. I held her gaze. I didn't blink. I wanted to say something sharp, something clever that would pin her where she stood. A line that would make her laugh stall midair. But I didn't speak. I didn't move. Instead, I smiled. A small, calm smile. Not bitter, not loud. The kind you give when you realize your dignity doesn't live in the words you throw. It lives in the ones you choose to keep. I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, exactly, but steadiness. She looked away first. I stood a little straighter. My back didn't hurt. My feet didn't wobble in my heels. That smile carried me through the grass like a second spine. As I walked back toward my seat, I passed the glass doors of the house. A warped reflection caught me off guard, and I paused. The dress shimmered slightly in the window's light, like it was made of memory instead of fabric. I reached up and smoothed the lace over my chest again. Softly, almost without thinking. Not because I cared how I looked, but because it grounded me. That dress had seen better days, so had I. A small snag in the sleeve, a faded patch near the hem, tiny flaws only I noticed. and yet it still held. I took a slow breath. The rose, bushes nearby filled the air with a heady sweetness, and the distant sound of someone laughing drifted from the far lawn. I didn't turn to see who it was. I didn't need to. I stood in that sliver of late afternoon light, watching myself just long enough to remember. I didn't come to be seen. I came because I still could. The house was quiet when I walked in. I didn't turn on the TV or take off my shoes. I just walked straight to the closet like I'd left something burning. The hallway light buzzed softly above me, casting that pale yellow glow only old bulbs give off. When I opened the door, the scent of lavender sachets drifted out, faint, almost shy, like the past asking permission to be remembered. I reached in and found it instantly, like my hand knew the path by heart. My fingers traced the seam she'd laughed at, slow and gentle. It used to feel smooth under my touch. Tonight, it felt like a bruise. Funny how something so delicate could suddenly feel so heavy. I didn't pull it out. I just stood there, hand resting against the fabric, eyes stinging but dry. The floor creaked beneath me as I shifted my weight, but I didn't move away. Not yet. I just stood with it. The memory came back in color, not black and white. We'd just left the diner, Harold still had cherry filling on his collar, and I teased him about it. We strolled past that little boutique near Main and Sycamore. I wasn't planning to stop, but the dress in the window was like something out of a dream. Soft lilac, delicate lace sleeves, a kind of gentle courage sewn into every thread. He pointed at it before I did. "That one," he said, leaning in, close. "It looks like dignity with a smile." I remember laughing so hard I had to stop walking. "That's not a compliment, Harold," I'd said between giggles. But he just shrugged. "It is if you've met you." The way he said it, so simple, so sure, stopped me cold. I looked up at him, and for a second, I believed him. I walked into that store and tried it on right then. Bought it too. Didn't wait for a sale. He said I didn't need one. The sound of soft jazz drifted out from a radio in the corner. Someone was humming along. I left the shop with the dress pressed against me in brown paper. And Pie still on his collar. I remember everything. He didn't slam the door. There wasn't a suitcase in the hallway. No shouting, no final words. Just the dress, folded square on the bed, right in the center. No note, no explanation, just fabric and silence. It was like an apology that I didn't want to say too much. I stood in the doorway staring at it. I didn't pick it up. I didn't sit down. I just stared. The light in the room was dim, catching dust motes in the air like they'd been waiting for me. The window was cracked open just enough to let in the sound of the neighbors' wind chimes. I remember the air felt thick, not warm, not cold, just heavy, like the moment before you cry, but without the release. I looked at the bedspread, rumpled. On one side, his side, mine was still made, and the dress, well, it sat there like it had something to say, like it knew more than I did. I kept wondering what it meant. Did he leave it because he thought I'd need it? Did he mean to hurt me with it, or spare me? The longer I stared, the more it felt like a question I'd never be allowed to ask. And I still don't know the answer. The bag was by the door, right next to the box of shoes I never wore. I had the dress folded inside it, tight and neat, ready for the church clothing drive. It was a Saturday morning, and the light in the kitchen was soft, golden through the blinds. Coffee brewed behind me, the scent rich and grounding. I stood, with one hand on the doorknob and the other on the bag, ready, but I couldn't open the door. I turned back, set the bag on the counter. Something just tugged. I pulled the dress out slowly. It felt softer than I remembered. My fingers ran along the lace like they were trying to read a map. I unfolded it completely and held it up. It looked smaller, now, quieter. I laid it across the table, smoothing the creases gently, like I was caring for skin I once knew well. "I'll just hold on to it for now," I whispered. But I knew even then, I wasn't keeping it for nostalgia. I was keeping it because something in me hadn't finished learning from it yet. I carried it to the living room like it was breakable. The TV stayed off. I didn't want sound. I laid it across the couch cushion and just sat beside it. The photo album was still open on the table. Harold on the cover page, smiling too wide, tie crooked. A half-sipped cup of tea sat next to it, cooling. I stared at the dress, its sleeves reaching toward me like arms at rest. I traced one of the buttons slowly. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender and thyme, like the inside of a memory. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just touched the hem and followed the stitching like a timeline. That dress had seen versions of me that no one else had. Hopeful, broken, quiet, determined. I thought I had outgrown it. But maybe it hadn't finished holding me yet. It didn't feel like clothing anymore. It felt like a page I hadn't finished reading, and I wasn't ready to close the book. I walked back to the closet. The bedroom lamp was on, casting a soft amber glow over everything, the kind that makes a space feel smaller but safer. The hangers clinked quietly as I pushed aside jackets and scarves. I didn't bury the dress, this time. I moved it forward, right where I could see it. It hung there, calm, waiting, not asking anything of me. Some things don't get donated, they stay. Not because we're stuck in them, but because they've become part of who we are now, not the girl who wore the dress, but the woman who made it through everything after, and sometimes that's worth keeping in plain sight, just to remember. The toast was already turning black, and still, I didn't move. I watched it happen like I was waiting for a reason to care. The butter sat on the counter beside me, softening into a puddle on its little plate, almost begging to be useful. The smell in the kitchen shifted, from warm and toasty to something closer to regret. That sharp, scorched scent that clings to everything for the rest of the day. I finally popped the toast out. The edges crumbled just from looking at them. I scraped it anyway, the burnt bits falling like ashes onto the cutting board. I didn't throw it out. I didn't start over. I just buttered it like nothing was wrong. The taste was bitter. Of course it was. But I took a bite. One bite. Then set it down. My stomach didn't want it. My chest didn't either. It wasn't about the toast. It was about everything I hadn't said. I sat at the kitchen table with that half-eaten toast in front of me, cooling beside the butter knife. I could still hear her laugh, the way it curled, around her words that weren't meant to wound, but did anyway. Who even wears sleeves like that? I didn't say anything then, just smiled, like always. But now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I whispered the things I didn't have the courage to say out loud. She wears them because she likes them, I muttered toward the wall. She wears them because she's survived. Things you can't imagine. My voice sounded strange in the silence. Small, but mine. I whispered more lines to no one, clever ones, sharp enough to sting. But each one came a beat too late, too safe. I've always been the one who smooths the edges, the one who says, "It's okay," before anyone even asks. But that morning, something in my throat felt raw, like it had been holding back for too long. I stared at the chair across from me, the one that stayed empty more often than not. My plate sat untouched. The tea had gone cold. The sun warmed half of my cheek. The other side stayed in shadow. I caught my reflection in the toaster while rinsing my plate, just a blur of a woman in motion. From the side, I looked pleasant, composed, like someone who had it together. But that wasn't how I felt. I leaned in a little. Not close, just enough to really see. There I was, eyes still kind, but tired. Lips turned up slightly even now. That same small smile I'd worn through funerals, forgotten birthdays, quiet betrayals. A smile meant to make others comfortable. Ran my fingers through my hair, still soft, still neat, but inside I was cracking. I'd used grace like armor, smiles like curtains. I'd drawn them whenever things felt too exposed. It worked. People believed the performance. Maybe I did too. But this time, looking at myself, I felt something shift. I didn't want to look pleasant anymore. I wanted to look honest. The tea on the counter had gone lukewarm. I didn't bother reheating it. I just stood there, the room brightening by the minute, and let the silence fill every space I'd left empty with politeness. I sat with my elbows on the table, my hands wrapped around the cooling mug, though I wasn't sipping anymore. I closed my eyes and began making a list, not on paper, just quietly, in the folds of my mind. The aunt who once told me, "You've got a strong build. Don't wear clingy things." The teacher who said I talked too much for a girl. The neighbor who asked if I was feeling bold today just because I wore red. The daughter-in-law who giggled behind her hand about my lace sleeves. They all meant it as nothing. Just passing. Comments, casual observations, maybe even teasing. But they stuck. Each one took something. A square inch of confidence, a notch in my back, a little fold in my voice. And I had let them. I always smiled, always smoothed, always tucked it away. I never asked them to take it back. I never stood taller, but that morning I realized I wasn't keeping a list to punish them. I was keeping it to remember who I used to be before I shrunk. Outside the window, a bird chirped like it didn't know any of this, like the day would go on anyway, and maybe it would, but I wouldn't go on quite the same way. The toast wasn't the only thing burning that morning. Something inside me had been slow roasting for years. A quiet kind of heat that I mistook for aging, for patience, for knowing better. But it wasn't any of those things. It was anger. Small and old, but not gone. I didn't reach for my apron, didn't tidy the kitchen. I let the crumbs stay on the counter. I let the butter melt further, seeping into its own edges, and I stood there, barefoot, tired, awake. The light from the window filled the room like it had something to prove. It made the wood cabinets glow softly. The air smelled like toast and time. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood, letting the fire inside me rise, not to rage, not to destroy, just to remind myself I was still here, still warm, still capable of burning through the version of me that played nice too long. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Alive. She texted the photo around 9 p.m. The phone lit up the side table just once. I was curled up in my corner of the couch, the one where the fabric dips a little. The lamp beside me gave off the kind of light that feels more like a memory than a bulb, soft and yellow, reaching only so far. The message just said, "Didn't it turn out?" Nice? I opened it. Everyone was in it. Her husband, the kids, even the caterer. Arms linked, smiles wide. The kind of photo people frame and set on the mantel for guests to admire. My eye scanned instinctively, right to left, and stopped. The image ended at my elbow. No shoulder, no face. Just an arm caught mid-wave and cleanly sliced off by the edge of the frame. Cropped, like clutter. I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't just a crop. It was a choice. The kind of clean cut you don't make by accident. I felt it in my chest, low, steady, like water heating beneath a lid. But I didn't say anything. I just pressed the side button, let the screen go dark again, and held my breath for a while. Then I exhaled, and it stung. I asked her the next day, "Did you notice I wasn't in the picture you sent?" She laughed, light and quick, like brushing off a crumb from her sweater. "Must have been a bad angle, Mom. You're being sensitive. I smiled, or at least my face did. I nodded, like I always do. Like peace was something I owed everyone else more than I owed myself. But her words? They wrapped around me like a coat 2 sizes too small, tight at the arms, itchy at the neck. I was expected to wear it, even if I couldn't breathe in it. I sat in that silence long after she'd stopped talking. Her voice echoed faintly in my head, not cruel, not kind, just careless. That's the thing. It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't bother to see. Me. I opened the drawer slowly, half expecting dust to fight me. The bottom one. The one I rarely touch. The one where I keep the things I can't quite throw away, but don't want to see every day either. Birthday cards from people I no longer talk to. A few old bills. One yellowing church bulletin from my husband's memorial. And at the very back, a shoebox taped shut. The words, "Justice," scribbled across the lid in black marker. I'd written it years ago, back when I still thought that word was something you could carry in your hands. Back then, it was a joke, a private laugh, the kind you tuck away with old photos and sharp memories. But tonight? Tonight, it didn't feel funny. It felt ready, like something inside me had waited years for this moment, for a quiet disappointment so steady it no longer surprised me, only clarified. The storm outside hadn't started yet, but the sky rumbled low like it was thinking about it. I lifted the box gently, like you do with something you're not sure you're ready to see again, and brought it to the bed. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew it was in there. My fingers didn't hesitate. They knew the weight of it, the way it pressed against the other papers, against time itself. The manila envelope slid out without a sound, like it wanted to be found. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what it held: letters, records, a will I'd revised but never shared. I held it like you hold something that could change everything, quietly but completely. I sat at the edge of the bed, the lamp casting a soft pool of light that didn't reach my knees. The clock ticked in the hush. Outside, thunder rolled again, low and sure, not rushing. I looked down at the envelope and smiled. Not the smile I wear at holidays or when someone needs me to look okay. This one was different. Still, unapologetic. The kind you wear when you finally stop asking for permission to matter. I slipped the envelope into my purse and set it beside the nightstand. It would come with me in the morning, whether they were ready or not. I lay there in the dark, a blanket pulled up to my chest. The rain had started. Light at first, just a tap-tap on the windowsill. The kind that sounds more like memory than weather. Familiar, almost forgiving. The house was still. No creaks, no voices, no distractions. Just me. I stared at the ceiling, though I wasn't really seeing it. They could crop me from photos. I know that now. But not from the stories. Not from the birthdays I showed up for, even when I wasn't invited. Not from the nights I stayed late cleaning their kitchen, folding their laundry, icing cupcakes with trembling hands. They could trim the edges of a moment, but they couldn't cut out the prayers I whispered over their sleeping children, or the money I slipped under pillows during hard months. No one sees that in a photo, but I remember every thankless act, every soft no that became a yes. Every small piece of me I gave away thinking it might help them love me more. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Instead, I let those memories play like a film in the dark. One flickering reel at a time. Warm light, soft hands, late-night drives, birthday cards no one read, all of it. My life was full, maybe not always seen, but full. Their photo? That was the one that came up short. The sun was already warming the backs of my arms as I reached for the strawberries. They were deep red and dimpled, just soft enough to give under my thumb. I took my time, letting the breeze cool the sweat. At my temples, the scent of peaches and cut flowers spinning through the air like ribbon. Then I heard it. My name. Said in a voice I hadn't heard in years, but still recognized. Said like it still meant something. I turned, and there she was. Doris. Her smile was a little slower now, softer around the edges, but still hers. For a second, I felt like a window had been opened inside me, letting in the kind of breeze you forget to miss until it finds you again. We didn't speak right away. We just stood there, eyes taking in all the years between us and letting them settle like dust in sunlight. Before her arms even reached for me, her eyes dropped, straight to the dress, that old lilac lace again, the one I probably should have let go of by now. I felt my shoulders tighten just slightly, bracing for what usually came next. A comment, a giggle, a question meant kindness but dressed in judgment. But Doris just grinned, wide and warm and a little surprising. "That dress," she said, stepping forward. "You still wear it?" I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, she shook her head, still smiling. "You still look like you hold the last laugh." And just like that, my heart fluttered, not from embarrassment, but from unexpected kindness, the kind that catches you off guard. The kind that sees you as you are and doesn't ask you to shrink. "Well," I murmured, smiling back, "I've worn worse," she laughed. "We both have." The heat lifted a little. Not the sun, my chest. I hadn't realized how tightly. I'd been holding it. The sidewalk buzzed with life. Kids giggled near the fountain. Someone played jazz near the corner. But in that moment, all I heard was someone who remembered me kindly and said so. She didn't remember saying it, but I did. It was years ago, after her husband had packed up his things and left a note that didn't say enough. She came into work with swollen eyes and silence around her like a second skin. No jokes, no earrings, just tiredness. We were alone in the break room, both waiting on the kettle. I passed her a napkin and sat down. "You're like a lighthouse," she whispered suddenly, without looking at me. "I don't even think you know it." She never said it again. I never brought it up. But I tucked that moment away in the softest fold of my memory. Now, standing beside her at the flower booth, that memory rose again. Unexpected, but sure. She leaned into the petals, brushing their edges with the back of her hand. "These make me think of that summer we forgot what sleep was." I smiled, "And ate cinnamon rolls at our desks," she laughed. "I miss that kind of tiredness." I looked at her then, really looked. Her back stood straighter now. Her hair had silver threaded through it like wisdom she'd earned. She was steady, whole. I wondered if she remembered the way she once drifted, lost in fog. I did, and I wondered if maybe I'd helped, even just a little. When she reached out to hug me, it wasn't the quick, awkward kind women sometimes do at markets. This one lingered. Her arms went around me like she meant it. Her chin rested just beside my shoulder. Her perfume still had that sharp citrus note I remembered, but her grip was different now, slower, warmer, like she was holding on to something. More than habit. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The market buzz faded for a moment. All I could hear was the soft rustle of my dress as it pressed against her, like it, too, remembered. Like it was part of all those years neither of us had fully spoken about. The breeze caught a corner of my hem, fluttering it gently between us. Her hands didn't let go quickly, and when they finally did, she gave me one last squeeze before stepping back, eyes a little shinier than when we'd first met by the strawberries. I stayed still for a beat longer than I meant to. Some hugs come with memory stitched right into the seams. She walked away with her paper bag tucked under one arm and her sunglasses in the other. Just before she stepped out of view, she turned back and waved, just once. A quiet gesture, but it landed like a stamp on the moment. Final, but kind. I thought about saying something. "You were right, maybe," or "Thank you for seeing me today." Or even, "Yes, I still carry the last laugh." But I didn't. Some truths live best without punctuation. They breathe easier in silence. I didn't need to tell her she was right. It showed in how I stood taller as I turned to go. How I walked a little slower, letting the breeze carry my skirt just so. The dress still fit. So did the life I'd built since the last time she saw me. And that was enough. 2 years later, it still fit. The lilac dress felt different now, tighter. At the waist, a little looser in the shoulders, like even it had aged with me. I pulled it from the closet carefully, like handling an old friend, and laid it across the bed before slipping it on. The fabric brushed against my skin with the same quiet softness, but the feeling in my chest was unfamiliar. I added a gold brooch Harold once gave me, something simple, oval, with a tiny pearl in the middle. My shoes had lost their shine, but they matched well enough. I didn't buy anything new for the occasion, just repurposed what was already mine. Standing in front of the mirror, the soft lamplight poured over my shoulders. The scent of pressed cotton mixed with a spritz of my vintage perfume, still half full from years back. Outside, city sounds floated through the curtain folds, horns, footsteps, far-off laughter, none of it touching me. I studied the woman in the reflection. She looked composed, calm, but I didn't recognize her. Not because I'd changed, but because I had survived. And sometimes survival makes you unfamiliar with your own skin. Smiled, pinched, practiced, but I wore it anyway. They stood and clapped as I entered the banquet hall. The applause felt warm, kind, some faces I hadn't seen in years. I smiled, waved softly, nodded my head like I was soaking it all in. But my eyes went straight to the back, the doorway. And then to the seat I'd saved near the end of the head table, one with a folded name card and a napkin pressed just right. Empty. I kept pretending not to notice, but I did. Every moment, every toast, every round of clapping that made the silverware jitter slightly on the linen tablecloths. It all sounded distant, like applause behind a wall, muffled. The scent of baked chicken filled the room, mixing with the faintest hint of blush wine and candle wax. The air was full of praise, but none of it filled that space inside me, the one that was waiting. Quietly, maybe foolishly, still hoping. I smiled again when someone said, "You look radiant." "Thank you," I replied, steady as ever. But the claps didn't touch the part of me still watching the door. The cake was beautiful. 3 tiers with a soft vanilla scent, buttercream curled like lace at the edges. I remember watching them wheel it in like it was something holy. Someone said, "You deserve this." Another chimed, "It's been a joy working beside you." Compliments came like confetti, colorful, weightless, and hard to clean up. I smiled, through it all, holding my glass, making the same small talk I've always been good at. "You're irreplaceable. We'll miss your grace." Words meant to flatter, and maybe they did. But I kept glancing toward that one empty chair, the one I'd saved without telling anyone, just in case, just in hope. The soft jazz from the trio floated above our heads, delicate and practiced, like they'd been hired to keep emotions in check. Champagne flutes sparkled beneath the chandeliers. People leaned into each other, cheeks flushed with warmth and celebration. But across from me, silence sat in the shape of someone I loved, and that silence said more than any compliment ever could. I saw him walking toward me before he spoke. He looked like someone's grandfather, silver hair combed back, jacket slightly wrinkled, shoes scuffed at the toes. The kind of man who'd once owned a jukebox or worked at a train station. Something about him felt familiar, even though I knew we'd never met. He stopped just a few feet away, his hands polite at his sides. "Would you dance with me?" he asked, voice soft but certain. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, just because I wasn't sure I remembered how. But then, my hand reached for his before I could stop it. It felt warm, steady. The kind of warmth that didn't ask questions. As I stood, something shifted in my chest. Not joy, exactly, but air, space, movement, proof that I still could. The dance floor was mostly cleared by then, the streamers above catching slow drafts from the air vents. My heels clacked gently across the polished tile, the sound small and steady beneath the last notes of the band's soft jazz. We didn't speak for the first few steps. We just moved, his hand resting lightly at my back, mine, on his shoulder, and in that simple act, I felt something return, not the past, but possibility. The music slowed to a gentle hum. My feet followed without thinking. He leaned in just slightly, voice low like he didn't want to disturb anything. "You move," he said, "like you've outlived storms." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My throat tightened too quickly and my chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in a long while. Recognition. Not of him. Of me. He wasn't talking about the dress or the way I danced. He was speaking to something deeper. The part of me that kept showing up, even when no one clapped. The part that stood anyway. I let my eyes close just for a moment. Let his words land softly. They didn't sting. They stayed, like grace that wasn't forced, but earned. When I got home, I didn't flick on the lights right away. The house was still, the kind of still that only lives in late night. I slipped off my shoes by the door, then padded softly into the bedroom. The windows were cracked just enough to let in the cool breeze. Crickets sang low, steady. I stood in front of the mirror again and unzipped the dress, careful not to tug. I laid it across the bed like something sacred, not because it was, but because it had been there, through everything. I sat down beside it, not to cry, not to ache, just to be. I looked at the folds in the fabric, the way the moonlight made it glow, ever so slightly, as if it remembered too, and I whispered, "Thank you." Not to the dress, to her, the woman I'd become while wearing it, the woman who kept standing even when the seat beside her stayed empty, the one who smiled, who burned, who danced anyway. I danced for her tonight, and I think, just maybe, she noticed. The shop door chimed just like it always had. That little silver bell never changed, no matter how many years had passed. The smell of fresh roses wrapped around me the second I stepped inside, sweet and full, like something still trying to bloom even in the middle of goodbye. Golden leaves danced across the sidewalk outside, but here it was warm, humid in a way, that only flower shops ever are, soft moisture clinging to your skin, petals breathing around you. Classical music floated in from the back, something gentle and old, like a memory humming. I didn't hesitate. I walked right past the roses, the lilies, the bold sunflowers, straight to the tulips. They weren't the brightest flowers. They didn't demand anything. They just bloomed, briefly and beautifully, and bowed out with grace. That's always been enough for me. Michael looked up from the counter and smiled. "You're early today," he said. I smiled back. "Had a craving for tulips." He nodded. Once, like he already knew. He didn't reach for the pre-made bouquets on the counter. Instead, he stepped around the register and began gathering the tulips one by one. Not rushed, careful, like each one mattered. I stood there pretending to admire the orchids, pretending like my heart wasn't knocking against my chest like I was 17 again. The breeze from the open door stirred the scent of eucalyptus, and something faintly sweet, ribbon glue maybe, something warm and familiar. Michael's hands moved with quiet certainty. He checked each stem before wrapping it, each fold of the paper neat, tucked just so. I watched the dust catch the sunbeams, slicing through the windows, turning the air gold. It felt like watching someone wrap a keepsake instead of a bouquet. "You take your time," I said, half smiling. He glanced up. "Some things deserve time." He said it simply, as if he were talking about the flowers, but I felt it land somewhere else, somewhere deeper, and I didn't look away. His voice was softer than I remembered. "You always pick tulips," he said. Not a question, not a tease, just something he noticed. I looked up from my hands, startled a little, not by the words, but by the way he said them. Like he knew something about me I hadn't said out loud. Something small and true. I smiled, half embarrassed. "Habit, I guess." He nodded once, still gently folding the bouquet. "They suit you." I didn't answer. Tulips had become a kind of quiet ritual for me, my way of being soft without needing permission. One small thing I could choose without anyone asking why. No one had ever noticed. Not until now, and somehow, that made it feel more mine. He slid the bouquet across the counter. "New cafe opened down the block," he said, almost offhandedly. "You want to try it?" The question landed soft. No pressure, just space. My cheeks warmed, and I laughed a little too quickly, more out of habit than humor. "Oh, I don't know. I don't usually." He didn't interrupt. He just waited, and I realized he wasn't asking for a date. He wasn't asking for a promise. He was just asking, like I was someone who still got to be asked. The bell above the door swung gently in the breeze, and the faint scent of coffee floated in from somewhere. Nearby, earthy, sweet, inviting. The street was quieter now, like it was waiting too. I looked at the bouquet in my hand, then back at him. "All right," I said. "Sure." He smiled. No celebration, no surprise. Just kindness. I didn't tell him I hadn't expected anyone to ask me anything like that again. Not gently, not without wanting something back. But I think he already knew. That morning, I changed my outfit twice. First, the cardigan with the pearl buttons, too formal. Then the denim one, too soft. I settled on the navy cardigan I hadn't worn since Harold's retirement dinner. Not because it was perfect, but because it was familiar, safe. The kind of fabric that holds its shape even when you don't. I brushed my hair back with a wide-toothed comb, applied mascara slowly, then stopped halfway. I didn't need more. The lipstick, though, I kept, my shade of red, not bold, not shy, just mine. A quiet confidence that stayed put, no matter what kind of day I had. I looked in the mirror and tilted my chin, just slightly. There she was, not a woman hoping, not even one expecting, just one who, for once, had left the door unlocked. Picked up my bag, checked my breath, and stepped into the morning sun. Outside, the air was crisp, clean, leaves crunching somewhere down the block. The sound of a neighbor's dog barking, a car starting, life doing what it does. And me? I was walking into it, with tulips in my hand and no rush in my step. We didn't talk much at first, just walked slowly, side by side, like two people who didn't need to fill the silence to prove anything. The cafe was just ahead, small with fogged windows and the smell of cinnamon already slipping out the door. He held it open for me, like it was the first door anyone had ever opened, and I stepped through like I'd done it 100 times. The window seats were empty. We slid into one, the cushions warm, the view full of falling leaves, orange, gold, brown, spinning and dancing like they'd rehearsed for us. The barista brought our drinks without asking. I cupped the mug, feeling the heat in my palms. He smiled, then leaned a little closer. "So, why tulips?" For the first time in years, I didn't deflect, I didn't laugh or change the subject, I just answered, because they bloom quietly and leave just as gently. He nodded. No follow-up, no fix, just the kind of listening that feels like a gift. and I took a sip, still warm, still mine. The knock came soft, uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she wanted me to answer. Rain tapped against the porch roof, slow and steady, like an old friend trying not to interrupt. The light above the door flickered as I opened it. There she stood, hair clinging to her cheeks, lashes damp, lips parted but silent. She didn't say anything, and neither did I. Not at first, because I knew this wasn't about victory. It wasn't about shame either. It was about returning. A quiet, kind. I stepped aside, the scent of wet leaves following her in, and the hallway behind me dimmed under the weight of everything we weren't saying. Her sleeves were soaked, and the sweater was too thin for this kind of afternoon. She clutched them like she was holding herself together. No ring, no voice, no pride, just red-rimmed eyes darting toward the floor. "You probably heard," she whispered, barely above the hum of the storm. I hadn't. Not really, but I didn't. Need to. Some things arrive without words. They live in the way a person folds inward, in how they stand when their strength has left the room before them. I nodded slowly, not asking for more, and opened the door a little wider. The scent of chamomile drifted from the kitchen, and I let it lead us both into the quiet. We sat near, the fireplace, though I hadn't lit it. The steam from our tea curled in the space between us, soft and slow. Her fingers wrapped around the mug like she needed it to stay grounded. Then, like peeling off a bandage she didn't want to show, she asked, "Do you still have the dress?" Her voice cracked on the word "still." I didn't answer right away because I did. It hung quietly in my closet, resting on a padded hanger under a clear cover. Not out of sentimentality, but respect. Not to show off, but to preserve. Some things you don't parade or toss. You protect. I nodded. She looked away, pressing her lips together. That nod held more than either of us could carry out loud. It wasn't just about the dress. It was everything beneath it. We sat across from each other in the chairs we once argued in. Now they held different weights. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the mug, and when the first tear fell, it did. So without announcement, just slipped quietly into the chamomile. I didn't flinch. She didn't sob. Just leaked, slow and quiet. Like she didn't believe she deserved noise anymore. I didn't speak. I just watched the steam rise between us, gentle and forgiving. The rain outside slowed its rhythm, as if it too didn't want to interrupt. She stared into the tea like it might hold answers, or warmth, or both, and still I didn't move, because I knew that kind of grief. The one that doesn't need a conversation, it just needs a place to land, and the part of me that once burned with anger softened. Rose is like the steam between us. I still loved her, not the same way, but in the way you love a shadow that once belonged to someone you raised. Every part of me wanted to say it, just once. I told you so. Not cruel, just clear. A punctuation to years of being dismissed, laughed at, pushed aside. But I didn't, not because I was above it, because I remembered what it felt like. To sit in that kind of silence, aching and exposed, hoping someone would hold your hurt instead of repackaging it into advice. So instead, I reached across the space between us and handed her a tissue. Then I poured more tea. The pot steamed softly. Neither of us said another word. She didn't ask to see it again. Didn't reach for the closet. Didn't mention the color or the lace or the memory stitched into its seams. She just finished her tea, slow and quiet, then stood. Her thank you was soft, half whisper, half apology. I walked her to the door. She stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped, but droplets still clung to the railing and glistened on the steps. Her shoes tapped softly against the wet wood. She walked away without the ring, and without the dress. And for the first time, I understood. Maybe that was growth. Not needing to reclaim something, to still be forgiven. I didn't reach for the dress that morning. Instead, I chose the navy slacks. They fit just right, not tight, not loose, just honest. I paired them with a blouse that flowed easy, like it knew how to move with the day. Soft fabric, quiet color, no statement, just comfort. The closet doors were wide open, sunlight striping the carpet in long, golden lines. The dress was there, hanging politely, waiting. But I didn't even glance at it, not today. I turned to the mirror, stood still, took in the lines around my eyes, the softness in my shoulders, the calm in my own face. I smiled, not for how I looked, but for how little I felt the need to explain anything. The mirror didn't blink. Neither did I, and that alone felt like enough. The church lawn was already alive by the time I arrived. Tablecloths fluttered in the breeze like flags in a quiet celebration. Kids darted around the lemonade table, chasing each other between folding chairs. The sun was high, casting a golden sheen across everything, like the afternoon had been painted in kindness. I caught the scent of hot dogs and lemon bars before I saw the tables. Sweetness mixed with summer. Someone was already laughing near the raffle stand. She was there, of course, stationed at a booth near the front, passing out brochures like she was born to organize. But I didn't look for her. Not really. I looked for the shade of the oak tree near the back. I looked for the group of women chatting over plastic cups of punch. I looked for my seat, not assigned, not saved, just mine because I belonged there, and I didn't need the dress to prove it. I caught her eyes across the crowd. Her gaze found me before I found her. And it did what it always did, dropped, waist, sleeves, shoulders, looking for lace, for lilac, for something to scoff at, even quietly. But I didn't bring it today. I brought something else. I nodded. Calm. A smile resting just beneath the skin, not even needing my lips to show it. I watched the flicker in her eyes, the brief confusion. The hesitation, not fear, not even a surprise. Recognition, the kind that only comes when something you thought you controlled no longer bends for you. And I didn't look away. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. But as I passed her table, I saw, and her hand paused ever so slightly as she passed a flyer to the woman beside her. It was tiny, barely a breath, but I noticed. The way her eyes lingered on me for half a second too long, the way her fingers didn't quite let go of the paper. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was just enough. Enough to feel that she'd noticed. Not the clothes, not the walk, but the quiet shift in how I stood. How I moved through that space. I didn't shrink. Not this time. I didn't wait for an invitation to feel welcome. I walked like I belonged, because I did. Not out of defiance, not to prove anything, but because I no longer asked for room. I simply took it, kindly, freely. The smile I wore that day didn't shield me. It wasn't armor, it wasn't a protest, it was peaceful. The kind you earn slowly, over time, over tears, over tea. The kind that sticks even after the crowd thins and the music fades. I sat under the oak tree with women I hadn't seen in a while. We talked about nothing. Peach cobbler, church choir, grandkids with stubborn hair. I laughed, freely. No one asked me why I wasn't in a dress. No one needed to. Because I wasn't being measured. I was being seen. And when I smiled, it wasn't. The kind you paste on when you feel out of place. It was the kind that rises all on its own. That lingers even when you're alone again. I stayed for the whole event, watched the long shadows stretch across the grass, smelled the cooling pavement, the soft melt of sugar in the air, And when I left, I didn't carry silence with me. I carried the kind of memory that doesn't ache, just echoes, softly, steadily, like a choice you finally made. The porch was quiet except for the soft creak of my chair and the hush of wind moving through the trees. Golden hour light stretched across the boards, painting the floor in streaks of honey. That kind of light always makes you pause, like the day's offering one last kindness before it lets go. Beside me, just under the porch window, sat the cedar chest. It had been there for years, faithfully holding things I didn't need daily, but wasn't ready to forget. My fingers brushed the lid. The wood still held that sweet, deep scent, part memory, part earth. I opened it. Inside, folded like a pressed leaf, tucked in a book long closed, was the dress. I hadn't touched it in months, maybe longer. I didn't reach for it to wear. That wasn't the point. I just needed to remember what it carried for me, what I had carried while wearing it. The wind chimes sang a gentle tune, like a lullaby meant only for me. And I sat there, in the amber light, with the lid open and my hands still, not holding grief, not even holding pride, just sitting with memory and the comfort of not needing to explain any of it. There she was, the hopeful girl who wore the dress, the day Harold surprised me with dinner and a song, twirling under string lights on a patio neither of us could afford. I can still feel his hand on the small of my back, light as breath. I laughed into his shoulder, not knowing how quickly moments like that turn into history. Then, the version of me who folded that same dress hours after he left, laying it on the bed like a question. I remember smoothing out the sleeves so carefully, even while my heart cracked wide. The silence in the room that night felt so loud, it throbbed. And yet my hands kept moving, neat, gentle, like I still believed in something. There was a woman who wore it to the wedding, the one who heard the laughter and didn't flinch, though inside she broke a little, who stood by the buffet with a plate she didn't fill and a smile that barely held, and the one who danced anyway. Years later, same dress, new spine. When the music started and a stranger held out his hand, not asking for answers, just a dance, I rose, slowly, with grace, with memory, with dignity that wasn't born of winning, but of staying. That dress never asked for attention, but it carried me, every version of me. And tonight, under this settling sky, I saw all of them, still stitched into its seams. There were days I wanted to yell, in the photo I was cropped from, at the girl who giggled behind her champagne glass at the dress I'd ironed with care, at the silence in my daughter's chair the night they all clapped for me. But I didn't, not because I couldn't, but because somewhere along the way, I'd learned that some truths don't need to be shouted. Some truths sit, stand, stay quiet, but sure, that dress taught me that. How to know when to speak and when stillness speaks louder. How to hold your breath without swallowing your worth. I used to think dignity meant being soft, agreeable. But I've since learned it's not about being quiet. It's about knowing when your silence is not surrender, but strength. I rocked gently in my chair, the dusk settling in. The breeze carried the scent of hydrangeas, tired from the day, leaning into the shadows. And I learned with them. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because finally I didn't need to. They laughed sometimes, dismissed me with their eyes, with their timing, with their silence, cropping me out, calling my choices quaint. But I kept showing up, not to prove anything, not to argue, just to live. At markets with my tulips, at fundraisers with slacks and a smile, at church lunches, whether I was invited or not, because I'd learned that the point isn't winning, it's enduring. It's being the woman who still stands, after the door is closed, who still writes cards, brings pies, fills rooms with steadiness. Grace isn't loud, It doesn't need centerpieces or applause. It just doesn't sink, no matter how deep the water. The sun had slipped lower behind the trees now, painting the porch in longer shadows, cooler light. The wind had quieted. The chimes were still. I looked at the chest beside me, still open. The dress inside no longer felt like a weight. It felt like a witness. My hands rested in my lap, not empty, but full of every day I'd chosen not to disappear. They say clothes don't make the woman, and maybe they're right. But that dress, if you carry it long enough, it becomes something more. It holds the shape of you, all your versions, all your decisions. It never made me, but it reminded me who I was. Every time someone tried to rewrite the story, and it held firm. The truth always does. Like good fabric, it softens over time, molds to your shape, weathers what it must. But it never tears. Twilight had settled in now. The porch glowed with the warm light from inside the house, spilling softly to the edges. Crickets had begun their chorus. I reached over and closed the lid to the cedar chest, not to lock anything away, just to honor it. Memory tucked inside, but not heavy, not anymore. Some things we carry, not to wear again, but to remember who we were when no one was watching. If any part of this story echoed something you've lived through, I'd be grateful to read it in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more quiet truths like this, I'd love to have you stay.